If everyone could please take your seats. I call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201, today Tuesday, May 10th, 2011. Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli? Here. Mr. Charleston? Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is public comment, and we have a little speech or a little talk by the Manning PTO. If you could come forward and state your name, please.
Hello, I'm Teresa Steger, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Manning PTO Executive Board. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. Given the financial times that our district is facing, we understand the need for all of us to pitch in and help where we can. We are glad that we have been able to support our students and teachers at Manning in many different ways. Tonight, we would like to share some of these with you. For the past 2 years, we have focused our fundraising efforts on providing smart boards for our classrooms. We have worked hard, but the benefit to our students makes the effort worth it. When classes resume in the fall, if all goes according to plan, we will have provided 13 smart boards at a total cost of approximately $27,000. We will have met our goal of providing smart boards for all of our classrooms. In addition to the smart boards, each year our PTO works to help enhance our school's learning environment. For our teachers, we provide discretionary funds to help them with classroom needs. We host a teacher's tea in fall and a Teacher's Appreciation Week in spring to let them know we recognize and appreciate the hard work that they do for us. We provide birthday books for approximately 500 students, assignment notebooks for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, snacks for ISATs, field day, and jump rope for heart. We provide school-wide assemblies costing about $2,000 per year, a library fund of $1,000 per year, and the Jeannie Burns and South School scholarships, which total $1,500, which are awarded to 2 Westmont High School seniors each year. We sponsor fun events also, the first day of school welcome, an ice cream social, a movie night, roller skating party, a parents bowling night, trim a tree, Twilight Stars, the fun fair and raffle, a book fair, and in cooperation with Miller's PTO, the 5th grade picnic. Our PTO has been successful mostly because of our wonderful families. We have approximately 325 families in our school, and at least half of those families volunteer in some capacity at Manning. Without that level of participation, we would not be able to provide so much for our students, teachers, and school. We are truly grateful for their efforts. Recently, we met with representatives of the school and the administration to discuss our goals for the 2011-12 school year. We hope that in cooperation with the administration and district, we can once again successfully meet those goals put before us. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just, add something to that? Thank you, because as we all know, we are facing tough financial times, and when the PTOs and boosters and parents groups really step up, it really helps everyone and certainly makes our job easier too, but thank you.
And I want to say thank you as well. I know I said it to somebody, I think in an email, but I think the Manning PTO is kind of the quiet giant in our district. You guys do a lot, and we don't often hear all of the things you do, so I'm glad you took a moment to share with us. And the Smart Board project, I think, was a wonderful enhancement to accelerate the learning environment for our students. You saw a need, and you really went after it. I really appreciate that, so thank you very much.
I just wanted to add thank you very much too also. It's tremendous that you put such an effort forth for everything. I think it makes a wonderful difference for all the kids there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Liz Rathburn, please.
could have stood up there, but I knew I was coming, so. Good evening. I promise this will be the last Wizards update for a while. Sorry I could not make the meeting right after the event, but I was asleep. Out of sheer exhaustion, I could not make the meeting. Those of you that were part of the day's events, you will know how much fun we had. My youngest son and I had the privilege to be transportation for the guys for the promotional visits, and we laughed hysterically in the 5-minute car rides we had with them. We made visits to the high school with Skycam and Tomahawk during the lunch periods. Smooth visited Manning, while King Arthur visited Miller, and Swoop and Mr. Magnificent visited the junior high. All of them commented on the wonderful staff members they encountered and the great enthusiasm from our students. It appeared to me everyone was ready for a fun night. The game, as you might have heard, was a success. I walked the gym and the outside areas most of the night and did not see one face that was not smiling or laughing all evening. I was stopped often as well, saying how much fun they were having, and I know many of the volunteers there that night heard the same things. The event was truly fun and exciting to plan as well. The opportunity to work with the Miller PTO, the Manning PTO, the junior high PTO, and the high school athletic boosters was much easier than anyone would have thought. All of these groups were amazing to work with. They stepped up where we needed help. They worked well with the other members of the community and shared in the original idea of hosting a true community event for everyone in our village. It was a pure joy for all of us to give back to the families. We all deserved a fun, family-oriented event to kick off the spring and the final weeks of school. Each committee worked well in getting this event to where it was. Track a few of these numbers if you haven't heard. 925 tickets were sold for the event. 42 pizzas were delivered to Westmont High School for our event, and 200 hot dogs were sold and consumed by our patrons. The best number of all, $6,621.12, the amount raised on April 21st. This money will be divided equally between our organizations. We as a committee are discussing the options and ideas of doing more things like the Wizards event. I've happily announced that I would be honored to chair or assist in any event we come up with, especially if it's involved with the Wizards. I will continue to praise all of the volunteers that assisted in this event. I will continue to thank the staff and the students that played against the Wizards. I will continue to appreciate all of the families that came to enjoy a night out at Westmont High School. I also want to thank the wonderful businesses that helped make this a success. Thank you to the Oak Brook Hills Marriott for accommodating the Wizards. Thank you to MJ Graham Visual Solutions for the design, maintenance, and hosting of the Westmont School Events website, and to Monkey Pencil for the design and printing of our Westmont Thunder uniforms. As well, thank you to Dilworth Windows and Doors, the Oak Brook Racket and Fitness Club, DJ's Sports Bar and Grill, Suburban Lock and Door Check for their sponsorship, and thank you to Photos by Rachel for the amazing pictures you might have seen, and to L&F for keeping us stocked with pizza all night long. Thank you is not enough, and thank you for letting us do something new in Westmont is deserved for everyone. My hope is that we have many more events like this to show the true meaning of unity in Westmont and District 201. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments? Then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, personnel recommendations, and 2, approval of student tour.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Sure, I can do it. The intergovernmental agreement, and actually I think this is, for tonight, just a brief conversation because technically the agreement expires July 1st, but if you look at the agreement, there's a caveat for rollover unless either party contacts the other party 90 days prior, which would be, April 1st. And the Village of Westmont did not contact us. We didn't contact the Village of Westmont, so the agreement will roll over for next year. But if the board would like, the timing of it would be March, our March meeting. Kim and I can bring the agreement to the March meeting, and then the board can have a discussion as to whether or not they would need to notify the village or if they would want the agreement to roll over, so.
The March meeting next year, you're saying?
Yes, March next year, because we're all set for this upcoming year.
Yeah, I noticed that it says that it just automatically renews, and it also talks about the franchise money that the village gets from AT&T to provide this. So it's not costing us any money, and it's not costing the village any money. I would, again, like to just take an opportunity to say thank you to Glenn Liljeberg for volunteering to help out with this. So
Okay.
And thanks to the
I think
village.
it sounds
for-
good, yes.
Thanks to the village. And I was just wondering if Glenn was still volunteering. I didn't know, so if it's rolling over. He must have been contacted already.
Yeah, yeah. So, good.
All right.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the first reading of the student handbook revisions that we all have copies of in our board books. Are there any questions, comments? Mr. Carr is here.
I have a couple questions.
You want to come up to the
Sure.
podium? And board members have in front of you copies of the books as well.
And so that you know as well, this is our first reading, and you also have the elementary changes that were proposed. We received those today. But at the May 24th meeting, prior to any board action, there will be an opportunity to discuss further. So any questions you may not have this evening, as you look through the handbook, if you have additional questions on the 24th, you'll have that opportunity as well.
My question is more about something that's not there versus something that is there. And this has come up, I brought this up to Kevin's attention earlier in the year. When the locker thing happened over Christmas,
Right.
I would like to see some sort of notation in the handbook that says something to the fact that the student needs to get to the administration within the first 2-3 weeks of the school year if there's a problem. If there's not a problem, obviously they're not going to come and talk with you, and then that $10 would apply if there's something wrong with their locker in December. But without that notice, I think we're going to get ourselves in some hairy.
Okay. And we do make mention of that to the students in the opening day activities as we go to lockers, try them out, make sure they work. The students do need to contact us, obviously, so they can get in their locker, but a notation in here is that.
But as a parent, it helps me.
Certainly.
We know, here it is.
Okay, that seems easy enough to add and consider.
My other question is more a general one for all schools, not just yours.
Okay.
The way students are signed out is inconsistent between buildings. So I was just looking for some sort of consolidation of,
When you
how that
say
works.
signed out from the school day?
yeah, I
so
have
for
a
an
doctor's
appointment?
visit
Okay.
or whatever, and I have to come in and take the child out. It's inconsistent between buildings.
Okay.
And one of the
We could
Right,
collaborate.
and we can do that. And one of the things, Diane, at one of our most recent administrator meetings, we were talking just in general of attendance policy and making that consistent and uniform. So that's one of those things that we can include in that piece. And that's something that can be brought to the board a little bit later once the administrative team has an opportunity to review those things. So there are some noted inconsistencies among our buildings with regards to the attendance policy. So we just want to make sure all that, including the sign-out procedure, is uniform.
That was it?
I had two questions, if you don't mind. Both of them at the junior high level.
Okay.
You can address those, right?
I'll give it a go.
Yeah, okay. The first is with regard to eligibility. There's a section taken out, eligibility for extracurricular activities.
Okay.
Students that have missed 17 or more days of school will not be allowed to participate on athletic teams.
Okay.
That was removed, and I was wondering what the rationale for that was.
And again, I'll have to talk to Ron about that. I
Okay.
don't, we can get back to you about what the rationale was in that. I was not involved in that discussion.
Okay, and then the other one, page 26, chronic disruption of the learning environment.
Okay?
Again, it looks like it's a straight removal. A student who accumulates 4 separate suspensions in a semester may be recommended for alternate placement or expulsion. It looks as though that was taken out, and I'm wondering about the rationale for that one as well.
The rationale, and again, I'd only be speculating because I don't know why they took the 4 suspensions out. I think by taking that out, it takes out, this is my thought process, not that I've spoken to Ron about why. The 4 separate suspensions could be a limiting factor, rather than by taking that out,
Okay, so what you're saying is-
becomes an arguing point.
Okay,
So that to me would be a rationale for doing that.
okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Again, I'll talk to
I
Ron
do.
and make sure that that's what they were thinking when they're,
Someone could come up and say, regardless of
He hasn't had 4.
of the infraction, I don't have 4, okay, got it. I understand.
so, again, I'll get clarity on that.
Okay.
That's why I would imagine you'd do that.
Thank you.
Did you have anything?
I had one question for you, Steve. I'm noticing here it says driving privileges and responsibilities. Apparently, the Live at 25 program has been
Right.
discontinued by the police department. I was just curious if they had any suggestions for any other programs or anything else the students could do to help earn the right to get the parking pass, so it's not, I mean, the Drive Alive at 25 program is a pretty serious thing for the students to be a part of. And I didn't know if they had anything else that they suggested to help students, learn the responsibility of driving safe.
The Alive at 25 program came out of Colorado several years ago. It's a pretty powerful program. Initially, it was funded, obviously, through the police department. They simply can't staff it anymore. We don't have something to put in its place. We wanted to take that out of the handbook in the meantime because we don't want to
Right.
it's just not accurate. So we certainly, obviously, driving safety is a huge part of what we do with the driver's education course and so on, but having that additional impact was valuable.
All right, so they don't have any...
We don't, at present,
Okay.
we don't have anything to replace that.
Okay, I have a couple of items as well. In the high school handbook, page 33, where it talks about, excuse me, where it talks about handheld games and music players, it says it's okay in study hall with permission from the study hall supervisor. And then if you go over to page 41, where you're talking about the media center, it says iPods can be enjoyed before school and during lunch only, but there's also study hall, it looks like, in the media center. So with that, it kind of conflicts. It says you can't have them. Under the media center, that whole thing where it says school-wide reminders doesn't jive with what is told elsewhere in
Is that being
the...
deleted?
Right.
Is that being removed? Am I reading the updates correctly? It says delete at the top of that box in the right-hand column there, above Media Center on the...
We're going to delete the part on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is what we're going to replace it with.
But it says delete.
On the right-hand side.
That's an inaccurate,
Okay, so
that's just an error. Let's slide that over.
And then it says like food and beverages belong in the commons, but then on the next page, it says it's okay to have clear liquids or something like that.
Right?
So, which is it? Just those little, they're just little things, but they
Right,
just
and
kind of, kids will
we had
pick
a
up on
study-
that stuff.
If you had a study hall that was in the media center, that would be the media center, or the supervisor could say, no iPods in here. And you could say that. And I would imagine there will be teachers on any given day who might say, we're just not doing iPods today. We have something else in study hall. And some teachers might say, you just can never have an iPod in here. And I'm going to leave that up to the supervisor's discretion. So the location in the building won't be it'll be up to the supervisor. And as far as clear liquids, water is one of the things that we have debates about all the time. We had water fountains when I was in high school, and that seemed to suffice. But now more and more of the brain research indicates that a hydrated mind functions better. So water is fine with teacher approval. And even in the media center, you're not going to have significant damage. One of the things when you have soda or something that spills in the media center, you get sugar, and we have a carpeted building. You have sugar, and it becomes a real problem. It becomes it's a nuisance for the bugs and that kind of thing. And it damages property. Water is not so much. So.
Okay, well, I would just ask that that section just be reviewed, make sure it's
Okay.
consistent.
Sure, absolutely.
Another section that I had a question on was page 33, common decency. And then on, just above, there's no page number here, just above number 3 where it says, any fashion choice deemed inappropriate by staff. I'm assuming that's not just applying to any fashion choice that's listed above, that means like anything you deem unacceptable.
One of the things, it's just part of the way things go. We can anticipate everything, we think we have it all figured out, and somebody's going to walk in with something new. And we have to be ready for that. So if we see something that comes in that's, a new fashion style that we see as a decency issue or a damage to property issue, I remember several years ago, and now this is into the 90s, the heavy chain thing became, on a wall, it became an issue because, one, it's potentially could be used to damage people, but also it was scratching up property and chairs and that kind of thing. So we had to make a decision on that. Wouldn't have anticipated it before. So by highlighting that, I think it lets kids know that the new thing, if it's not good for school, we can make a decision on it and not have to wait for a handbook.
It's sort of
revision
your
to-
disclaimer.
A bit of that. We have to have some discretion in doing that. Also, we have some situations, and I'll come up with one example, where our rule says clip must be dressed from shoulder to 5 inches above the thigh, or above the knee. Well, on me, if I'm a 6'5" person, that's different than if I'm a 5-foot person. 5 inches proportionally on, you get the picture. Not too much of a picture, I hope, but you get the idea. It's just different. So a student might say, well, it's 5 inches above my knee, but yeah, you only have a 5-inch leg. That's a problem. So we have to have some kind of a disclaimer, I think is a good term, just to say, okay, I get what you're saying, but there's also the fact that it's just that's going to be a distraction in the learning environment. So
I would just make it a little more that it is a disclaimer, like by adding something like any fashion choices not listed above deemed inappropriate by staff, something like that, just so it's a little clear what you're
kind of that
applying there.
Including but not only.
Yeah, that type of thing.
Okay.
Then on the section, the code of conduct in the extracurriculars.
Okay.
I guess I wanted to know, why is there a distinction between performance versus other co-curriculars as far as the code of conduct seems to apply just to performance-based activities like sports?
That's not the intent, and why do you say, I'm interested in why you say that, because the term, we're trying to make the code of conduct apply to athletics and all of the other extracurricular activities that we have, clubs and so on, because those are privileges, they're not a right. And so I'm interested in, because I do want to clear that up before we put this in, we codify this.
Well, it starts off, participating in co-curricular activities and representing Westmont High School is a privilege, not a right.
Right.
Students participating in performance-based activities act as representatives of the school district, and then it goes on. And accordingly, they are expected to, so it seems to imply that this whole section only applies to performance-based activities. At least that's what I got out of it as I was reading through it.
Well, that's not the intent, so, and because clearly as you read further on, we're talking about athletics, and we do very clearly delineate that the code of conduct applies to, and then we name all of them. It's at the top of the next page. All of the ones that we currently have. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure that all of our students who are involved in our extracurricular activities are held to a similar standard and expectations at school and in the community. So I certainly welcome if you'd like me to clarify language, or you'd like to offer a suggestion as how we can clarify language in that. I'm certainly welcome that feedback, because The intent.
I mean, as I read through it, it just didn't seem to apply to things that weren't, I mean, you have them listed here that are the performance-based, examples include but are not limited to, and then performance-based activities. And it's, I'm assuming you're referring to where it says co-curricular,
Right.
comma, performance-based activities, meaning that all co-curricular and all performance-based activities?
Right.
Okay. I think that should be clear, a little more well-defined.
Just define what co-curricular.
Yeah, that it includes all co-curricular activities. Clubs, sports, arts, that sort of
One of the things when we say co-curricular, we were trying to create a huge umbrella because there's some, we don't necessarily, some people don't think of National Honor Society as a club, it's a service organization. So we try to create an umbrella that meets all of those different activities that we have.
And then the other question I had, just kind of a general thing about the handbook itself. So you have the handbook put together, and at the beginning of the year, some incident happens, and you find out that, ooh, this really isn't spelled out that well in the handbook, and I wish we would have worded this differently or whatever. Is there a possibility of editing or changing the handbook
Absolutely.
during the school year so that we're not waiting a full year to fix a problem that is discovered? Because I'm assuming you don't really see everything until you have a test case.
Absolutely. There are situations that may arise in a school year that we don't anticipate. We can certainly, our main responsibility then is to communicate that. So if we've had to change a policy, change a procedure, change something that is in the handbook, or add something, just needs to be communicated with all members of the school community, whether it's junior high, high school, elementary school.
Do you envision this just going pretty much as an online document as opposed to printing it up every year and giving, do you see real advantages to the students having a printed copy of it as opposed to having it online?
Well, we do have a responsibility at this point to, at the beginning, once the school year starts, when a student starts their school year, that they sign off on the fact that they've received the handbook. Now, we do have it online already. It's already posted online. One of the other advantages that we have, and we started this in 2003, is the planner that's in the book. Now, not all kids use the planner. I understand that. But a significant majority of our kids do use it. And I think that from a management perspective, that's helpful. It's also helpful when a kid says, asks a question, one, and I'm not trying to be too funny here, this is 5 inches. So when a kid walks in and says, my skirt's an appropriate length, I just say, hold your handbook up, and they measure it out. But the other part of it is, this is a resource that we can expect the kids to have, and almost all of the kids carry this with them. So it is a helpful tool for kids to have. There is an expense involved, clearly. But at this point, we see value in having that delivered to them. It's also a responsibility to hand them a physical document and say, you have been informed of this document and are now held responsible for the contents of that document. In case we have a situation where a kid is in a discipline situation and they then can't claim ignorance as a defense. So that's one of our responsibilities.
If it helps, I've seen it. I've seen that physical document with, especially in the sports part of it. My son had said, well, I had to sign it. I know I was responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
It does, I think having it be real is better than having it be virtual.
Right, just if we were to say something along the lines of, you have to sign off that you went to the website and perused the document, it just wouldn't have that same, wouldn't hold the same power, I don't think, at this point. Someday that may be something we...
I would just add, too, as a parent who's had that, this really is a helpful tool, especially since it's not that big, because it does kind of remind them, first of all, to use something like this, but also that it's right there at all times.
Right.
So just in case someone's thinking of breaking the rule, it's right here.
Breaking the rules, or as a reference, hey, where do I go if I need a late pass or an early dismissal pass? A lot of what we do, it can't be all-inclusive. I mean, it's just, there's so many things going on, but it's pretty close. I mean, there are,
But to go to Joel's question, it's online though, too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it is. And that was helpful, that's helpful for parents, you know, when they have the same question. Okay, my kid's going to be, I need to have my student dismissed at 11:30. How do I go about doing that? Okay, this is what I do. And that kind of stuff's helpful.
Yeah, I was just thinking the online version, obviously you could update, should there be any changes during
Right.
the school year, and it'll always be, you know,
It's a living document.
Right.
Or it's a, yeah, that's a malleable document. And I think that could happen. We just need to communicate that.
Okay.
If we were to make a change on page 33, this was changed on January, at the January 11th board meeting discussion, or whatever it was. And we have administrative discretion to make the right choice in the moment, that's in the best interest.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions, Steve. And again, this one is in the junior high, it's on the very first page. And again, I didn't have this when I was looking at it, but on the first page, it talks about page 20. In the current language, guidelines for daily written assignments, the following manuscript form will be used for all classes at Westmont Junior High. And then the suggested revision is delete entire section. The expectations will be presented to students during their classroom activities. And I don't know if this is a place to do this or something, but I know just from a parent perspective, if there is any way that that could be posted somewhere, specifically like the syllabus that starts at the beginning of the year, for parents to always be able to go to, because I know every year in junior high and high school, the first week of school, they generally go through all this, but, you know, come March or something, you'd kind of like to see what's going on, and, you know, sometimes that gets lost. So I'm wondering, again, I didn't have in front of me the junior high book that had this piece in, so, you know, now I would go back and look. But is that, and this might not even be the place to talk about it, and that might be another conversation, but to have something, as long as we have the online, I don't know if that's under Skyward or something, but something that what the assignments are, so that there isn't any kind of guessing, especially for like 6th and 7th graders who this is the first time that they might be dealing with a good number of classes and what is their assignment, and when parents are working with them. And certainly it does follow into high school as well.
Sure.
But to also take those documents that the teachers put together in the beginning of the school year, put them online so that they're always there, so that parents can refer to them, especially when you have like a bigger project, if you want to start talking to your child about time management, what has to be. So just that general question of syllabus and assignments. So I wonder, and you may not be able to answer this, why that is being taken out of the handbook. And again, I haven't looked at the junior high handbook to see what page 20 said, but do you know anything about that?
I know that in different classes at the high school, and again, I'm speculating, but my guess is that certain, you know, the following manuscript form will be used for all classes at Westmont Junior. The term all may be too all-inclusive and may not apply to certain lab reports. It may not apply to different assignments as they come in. So to have the word all for my English class and someone else's science class and someone else's health class might just not be accurate. So it may just be a matter of clarifying the accuracy. I'll certainly speak to Mr. Fiala about the possibility of taking those classroom expectations and having them posted. We'd call it a syllabus, and those are all posted. But his classroom expectations and having them posted, especially if they're going to be different, particularly in a grade level. So if you have a 7th grade language arts class and a 7th grade science class and a 7th grade math class, that have some, you know, vagaries in how they want assignments posted in manuscripts and so on. That could be clear to a family who's at home working on an assignment. I mean, I have a 7th grader right now. I know how it goes. So that might be something that could be helpful.
Marie, before we leave this one, I have a question about this one as well.
Okay.
The same number.
Okay, but I wanted to, the one thing I wanted to refer to was good to going to that area where the media center, like it was, I found this refreshing to see, you know, a few school-wide reminders, a long list of what you can do in the media center and a short list of what you can't do, and study hall and the media center, what it looks like. I thought that was very well written, and I like that format because it kind of takes away from, you can't do this, you can't do this, and it kind of talks about a long list of what you can do. So that seemed very, a nice change, and that obviously took quite a bit of work. But you can see how that whole area has been really punched up, and I commend the media center and library people for doing that. But it took something that we had previously and really punched it up and really talked about really good things. So my question was, then we took this thing, which now I see here, and I can see why maybe it went out when it came out, because it says use, regular 8.5 by 11-inch paper, blah, blah, blah. And I could see how that might not pertain to art or science. So I can see that, but it just seems like we've kind of taken a step back to some degree. So that was just to finish up what I was saying. So go ahead.
Along the same lines, and Kevin, this is partially maybe for you as well, but we had a lot of staff and teachers and board members that went to the Noble schools. And one of the things that we saw there was a high level of consistency in how every classroom teacher administered certain basic guidelines. And this was one of the most highly consistent administered items. So along the lines of what Marie's saying, I'm a little surprised to see it coming out, because I understand there are a lot of arguments for having more discretion, but at the same time, there's potentially also arguments for saying we have a standard and giving the teacher some power to be able to say, this is the standard. So when a student comes in with a 5x7 yellow piece of paper written with pencil and says, but I did the assignment, there's something for the teacher even empowered to go back to and say, and I think in here, and I'm looking at it now, and it says guidelines. I don't think it boxes people in. It's not saying it's not forcing them to use this. The teacher at their discretion can say, we don't have to use the guidelines, but I just want to mention it in relation to our Noble Network visit, that this particular item happened to be one of the things that was incredibly consistent across every single classroom, every grade level, every topic. It didn't matter. They had a core set of standards that they followed. So I agree with Marie that it might be worth a quick conversation and revisit if making these go away is really the best choice. We can have teachers use them more effectively, but maybe we don't necessarily want to have them go away.
Sure. And we can also talk to Mr. Fiala as well, what the plan, it may not be that the guidelines are going away, it's just that they're going to be communicated in a different
Differently.
manner.
Right.
We can confirm that to make sure that, I think, everybody would agree that high-level consistency is important, especially for students to be successful.
Right.
So we'll just ensure that.
Right, because it says the expectations will be presented to students during their classroom activities, so it leads you to think that each teacher's sort of on their own then.
Right, but that's something we need to
Right.
We should clarify that.
clarify that.
And again, it goes along that lines with, it's as important, well, to the parents who are working with our students, that we know, because they might come home and say, well, they said we could do it just on any kind of paper. Then you have the 5x7 paper and that. So
Particularly for the younger student, sixth grade, they're one grade older than fifth grade, and in fifth grade, we still think of them as little kids, and they're only 1 year older. A lot of parents are still giving a fair amount of guidance to sixth graders. I'm really thinking about sixth graders, but as you go along, there's still a lot of guidance, I think, being provided at home in some cases. And I think we as parents, sometimes need to know where the rails are also, so we can help keep the kids
that can
on
happen
them.
in high school too.
So, just along those lines. And when we met with the whole group that visited the Noble Network, one of the things that was discussed was some of those consistencies. It seemed that the group as a whole viewed it as a positive. So, I don't necessarily want to lose that.
Sure.
Okay, a couple other things. Now at the Westmont High School, the next page, it takes that first page 3, and it says, delete the rationale as contents are covered in other aspects of the handbook. I just wonder if there's any reason to take out our statement of philosophy for the high school and be responsible, be respectful, celebrate success, educational objectives. If there's any downside to keeping it there right up front for everybody to see. I'm wondering what the rationale is on that.
Well, one of the things is each page costs a lot. It has an additional cost to the book. And I'm not penny wise and pound foolish at all when I say that. Some of these things, particularly when we get to educational objectives, they're if you read through them, when you get to that point, those things have been in place for 15 or 20 years. They were there in place before I got here, and we've kept them in, and they're not current, although some of it is relevant. So when we were looking at it, and we were looking at trying to make this as current and effective a document as possible, we do cover what PBIS is, and that's a big part of what we do at school. It just didn't see that as a guiding element of a handbook, as having the same value and same value as far as space as some of the other things. Certainly, if the PBIS things are a nice information item, but and we can certainly consider putting them in. I would say the educational objectives part really is lacking in current value.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because if that all went away, it just starts with Community Unit District 201 policies, and then it starts acceptable use of technology. So for the one side of a page, to me, it does set the tone of what this book is. And it talks about the mission statement and the philosophy and that. And, you know, your point is well taken in terms of maybe that these educational objectives are, you know, outdated. And maybe that's something, you know, I know in strategic planning, our meeting, we were talking about coming up with a motto and things like that. But it just almost sets the tone of like what this whole thing is about.
Right.
Where if you start into the do's and don'ts, it doesn't, to me, there's just, it just is lacking something if you don't have a statement.
Okay.
So that's just my,
Okay, we can certainly consider how much of that we would like to bring back in, because
Yeah.
I certainly see, you're a parent looking at the document as well, and
Right.
and we can certainly consider.
because you say right out, you know, let's say, again, you say it's been around for 15 years. Well, what about that freshman who comes in? Maybe it's their first child who's a freshman. So to see this, be responsible, be respectful, celebrate success. Let's let them see that 100 times, you know, because then I think it solidifies that in their head. So, the next thing was on this next page over here on participation expenses. I do see that it has participation expenses, and it definitely looks like it's taken for sports participation and added for extracurricular participation. But then it says at the junior high and high school level, and then it goes into students will incur current board student fee for athletic participation. So there seems to be like, and it continues to talk about per athlete. So I wonder if that's something to have a consistency throughout, because it does look like, it says here, the rationale is the current language is specific only to athletes. Clubs and event participants must be included as well. But then in the text, it talks specifically about athlete. Am I missing something there? If you go from the first one,
I see what
current
you're
to
saying.
suggested revision.
So in the second, in the first full sentence after the colon, students will incur the current board-approved student fee for athletic participation?
Right,
How about if we just take out athletic and just say participation?
right.
Okay.
And then at the end, of the very last word on there, per student athlete.
Well, and why are the elementary sports listed in the high school?
Well, that was my next question. Why is, then there's,
This front section of the handbook are the CUSD universal
Okay.
parts.
okay, because that was my next question. Why is that in the
I
book?
know
So,
you're just trying to make sure we read it.
yeah,
I get it.
And actually,
Okay.
I do appreciate that you have, so that's.
okay. The next thing is, if you go to the next page, well, page 31, field trip, student tours policy. So if I'm reading this correctly, the second column says add on the top. So we're keeping the first part and just
adding it to the bottom part of that.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a delete, particularly since it talks about students who know in advance they'll be out of class for a school field trip must make every effort to discuss blah, blah, blah. So you're not,
No, we want to add that statement. Really, if we have a student at a school-sponsored event who violates the discipline code, we already would deal with it as a school, a discipline situation
Okay.
at school. It's just not in there, and we haven't really had a problem with it. We
Okay.
just thought, well, we might as well put it in there, make the statement, and students can't have it be an issue.
Just for language purposes, you're talking about the code of conduct? They violate the code of conduct? I mean, it just says,
No, it's school-
violate Westmont High School expectations, consequences in accordance with policy and procedure.
In policy, that would be the discipline code. So if I have the students on a field trip, we go to the field museum, and students break any of those rules, we would discipline them as if they were in a classroom breaking the same rules.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that that first part wasn't coming out.
No, we need to, that's just in addition to, because
Okay.
there had not been a discipline statement in there.
Okay, and again, I would like to, as we're looking through this, I think the media center adding, I thought that was a great, you could tell that some time was done in that. I thought that
I'll
was
share that with Michelle.
very well done. And I like the, then when we get to the guidance services, it definitely, you can see that that's been kind of punched up too, in terms of talking about college planning and creating that 4-year plan and that. But I have a question on page 21, and maybe this is just something it's just class of 2012, 13, 14 graduation requirements. Then it's changed, the first page refers to 12, 13, 14, and then second page is 15. What is that?
There's an additional graduation requirement for the class of 2015. So it just, so that it's very clear.
Okay,
And we've done that every year as the state provides us with new graduation requirements. We put a different page for them, just so
Okay.
that no one can,
so for the class of 2015, new section of the school code states that they must take the Prairie State Achievement Exam, right? Is that what, okay,
that's going to be that's the addition.
okay, okay. Okay, that's all I have.
And I appreciate your
Well-
comments about Michelle and
Oh, okay.
and Sue's comments about the media center. I'll share that with them.
Okay.
And our guidance counselors, Carol Wyrostic and Larissa Zalisco, and our registrar, Nancy Bethel, did spend a lot of time, rather than just editing what we currently have, revising the whole thing. And we did the same thing with the code of conduct, and
that
decided that was needed to be
That was what I was
a
going to say.
major change.
Yeah. In addition to Marie's comments on some of the other sections, it was obvious that a lot of work went into the code of conduct and participation and the discipline. I noticed that our rule for infractions hasn't really changed too much. It's good to see all of this wording buffed out quite a bit, and it's a lot clearer now. I know one of the things we had talked about briefly was, is it strong enough? If there is a substance abuse or a law conviction, if there's a conviction, we're still only holding to that 22% of the first season. We have had some discussion about whether that should really be a whole year, if it comes to that. So I didn't know if any conversation had gone on around, because we haven't really changed, we've just dramatically improved the wording. So I'm thankful for that. Just curious if any talk went on around.
This language in this step process is fairly consistent with the other high schools in the state of Illinois.
Okay.
And that's consistent with IHSA's. They don't tell us what to do, but they offer guidance on it. Frankly, I think having been involved with high school athletics as a player and as a coach, and now I have a high school athlete, I think the loss of a quarter of a season is a major sanction. You only get to participate for so long, and it's 4 years if you're lucky. To lose a quarter of that of any season is, along with the embarrassment and so on that goes along with it.
Well, I think for some of the items, I get that. It's just when you get up to the sort of crime, actual against the law crime, that was kind of where it got a little grayer for me, that perhaps our discipline should be a little,
I think, I hear what you're saying. I think when we have a situation where a student commits a crime, there's administrative discretion that's involved here. I think it's also understanding that this is a privilege, not a right, when you talk about extracurricular
Right.
participation. That can be a coach's decision as well. I mean, these are the least of those expectations, the least of what would happen in a situation like that. There are other opportunities that, I mean, a coach could certainly just say, you know, that does not fit in with what I expect of my participants, or I'm a sponsor of an event. It's just not how we represent ourselves.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Sure. Would it be possible for us to get copies of the athletic participation card? Because I'm assuming that there may be some things on that card that aren't in here, or is everything that's on the card in here?
Right. And
It's
and
all
we'll have
in?
to change our cards.
Okay.
Because yes, it's selected, it's just take it off and put it on there. But yeah, you can, I can get you a copy of
No, I
what
don't need
this
it if
year's
it's in
card-
here. I didn't
Yeah,
know if there was
it's the
something
same
different on the
exact
card.
language, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll print new ones if this is what we decide we're going to call it.
Anything else?
Like I said, I do appreciate your paying attention to this. This is something that we spend a lot of time with, and we live in all year. And as much as we'd like to think, when we get done with this on the 24th, that it'll be perfect, we know we'll be back here in the beginning of, or in the end of April, beginning of May, doing the same thing again, because there'll be new things that come up, and new things that make this a relevant discussion. So I
Thank
certainly
you.
appreciate your input.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we going to do anything with that? Or that's
Yeah, why don't we let the board, you just received the elementary changes, we'll give you an opportunity to read those, and then on the 24th, we can talk about those.
In your orange folder is the elementary. Okay. The next item on the agenda, superintendent's report.
Okay, just to highlight a few things. Number one, professional learning communities. Originally, the plan was to do a brief presentation for the board this evening. It's intended to be a joint presentation between the WTA and the administration. Grant Starr wasn't able to be here this evening. So I told him that we could just bump this to the 24th and have that conversation then. But to kind of give you an idea of the things we discussed as a committee, and then the rationale for the recommendation that we're bringing forward to the board. So we'll do that on the 24th. With relation to the June 2011 board meeting, Kim is researching whether or not we'll need to amend our budget at the end of the year. And part of what occurs, the state tells you how long you have to have the legal notice posted before you can have your budget hearing, and you need to conduct another hearing when you amend your budget. Because of some of the time constraints we'd be faced with, our June 21st board meeting would be too early to take care of that. And so a couple options for the board to consider. One is we could bump back the 21st meeting to the 28th. I do know Dan Charleston, that week his family's out of town on vacation, so he already told me that the 28th would be problematic for him. Or the other option is continue with our 21st board meeting. We could add a second meeting on the 28th. Odds are it would be a pretty brief meeting, and we would only be required to have the minimum 4 board members if there were conflicts. So it's kind of up to the board what your preference would be, to keep the 21st date and add a second date on the 28th.